Queer cinema addresses the issues faced by the queer community in addition to bringing a new kind of sexuality and gender aesthetic in the context of cinema. Both Midnight Cowboy, directed by John Schlesinger, and Moonlight, directed by Barry Jenkins, can be situated within the genre of queer cinema. These films explore stories of love, identity, family dynamics, discrimination, struggle, and self-acceptance, providing a new perspective on the lived experiences of queer people. While Moonlight explicitly explores homosexuality through its protagonist Chiron, Midnight Cowboy presents a more ambiguous depiction. Released in 1969, Midnight Cowboy became the only X-rated film to win the Academy Awards for Best Picture. Despite its lack of overt homosexual relationships, the film aligns with queer cinema through subtext, character relationships, and its portrayal of repressed sexuality, common in a period when homosexuality was often censored in mainstream media, resulting in it being covert, as seen in films like Strangers on a Train and Rebel Without a Cause. Both films follow marginalized male protagonists navigating identity, masculinity, and alienation within an oppressive social and economic environments. Both Midnight Cowboy and Moonlight are deeply shaped by their social and economic context. Midnight Cowboy reflects an America during the Vietnam War, where traditional ideas of masculinity, once embodied by a heroic cowboy, had deteriorated into survival through hustling and conning. This is evident through Joe Buck's belief that he can achieve success by a simple goal of selling himself to older women, only to be confronted with the harsh reality of New York City, where he is forced into homosexual prostitution and conning to survive. His interactions with wealthy clients, as well as his eventual dependence on Ratso, reflect the collapse of the American dream and the shift from independence to desperation. This sense of national unease aligns with films like Easy Rider, which similarly portrayed disillusionment in the late 1960s America. In contrast, Moonlight explores systematic poverty within Black communities in Miami, particularly through settings such as Liberty Square Housing Project. The persistent racial wealth gap leaves African Americans in an economically precarious situation and creates a vicious cycle of economic struggle. Angela Hanks. The poverty is reflected through Chiron's unstable home life, his mother's addictions, and Juan Hurl's a drug dealer selling to Paula, highlighting how economic systems perpetuate cycles of hardship. The presence of drugs within the community, alongside limited opportunities, creates an environment where survival takes priority over self-expression, reinforcing the suppression of Chiron's queer identity. In both films, characters are constrained by rigid expectations of masculinity. In Midnight Cowboy, Joe performs an exaggerated version of masculinity through his costume and speech, despite underlying vulnerability and trauma. Similarly, in Moonlight, Chiron adopts different identities across the 3 stages of his life, ultimately embodying a hyper-masculine persona as Black, which mirrors Juan and serves as a defense mechanism against both societal and internalized pressures. Homosexuality in both films becomes a source of alienation. Joe's same-sex encounters are tied to economic desperation and shame, reflecting a time when such identities could not be openly expressed, with William Eskridge, professor of law, saying, "The 1960s were dark ages for lesbians and gay men all over America. The overwhelming number of medical authorities said that homosexuality was a mental defect, maybe even a form of psychopathy." In contrast, Chiron's sexuality is more explicit, yet still repressed due to social stigma within his community. Despite these differences, both characters experience isolation not only because of who they are, but because of the society that refuses to accept them. In Moonlight, the opening features a smooth arc shot tracking Juan. The fluidity of this movement reflects his confidence and stability. This is immediately juxtaposed with a handheld chaotic camera as Juan is chased by other boys shouting slurs at him. The shaky movement places the viewer in Chiron's perpetrator's perspective, emphasizing fear and alienation. His escape into the abandoned crack house visually reinforces the intersection of social and economic marginalization. Juan's intervention positions him as an ally, a heterosexual person who is not a part of the LGBTQ community, but supports those individuals, a common character archetype in queer cinema. This sharply contrasts with Midnight Cowboy, where Joe lacks any such support, reflecting a time when queer identity remained deeply repressed. In Midnight Cowboy, it opens to Joe dropping a bar of soap, connecting with the phrase, "Don't drop the soap," rising in the 60s as a joke of prison rape, hinting at Joe's sexual abuse and homosexuality. The repeated calling of "Where's that Joe Buck?"
Where's that Joe Buck? Get along, little doggies.
Where is that Joe Buck? Look at this crap!
Yeah, where's that Joe Buck?
Followed by Joe asserting this question, highlights his fragile sense of identity. The mirror motif pushes this, as Joe continuously reassures himself as his hyper-masculine cowboy persona. Additionally, blocking techniques, such as crowds obstructing the camera, used later in the film as well, visually isolate Joe within New York City, emphasizing his alienation despite being surrounded by people. Costume and setting play crucial roles in expressing identity. Joe's cowboy outfit and the radio he sports initially symbolizes confidence in the promise of the American dream. However, as the film progresses, its deterioration mirrors his psychological and economic decline. His radio, which he eventually sells, and throwing away the cowboy attire, represents the complete loss of that dream. In Moonlight, Chiron's identity is reflected through evolving costume design. As Little, he wears white, symbolizing a blank slate, reinforced by the unfinished wall behind him during the dinner with Juan. Later, in Chapter 2, after Chiron and Kevin's romantic night on the beach, Chiron wears a white-blue striped polo, while Kevin wears a blue-white striped polo, with the two completing each other. The recurring motif of blue throughout the film symbolizes authenticity and emotional openness, with Kevin wearing more blue in this scene, reflecting his relative comfort with his identity. Later, reinforcing the two go back to Kevin's apartment, where he changes into a blue shirt. In Chapter 3, Chiron embodies the gangster identity to conceal his true self and put on an overly masculine front, wearing a black wife beater, accompanied by gold accessories, mimicking Juan's outfit. Chiron even put the same gold crown on his dashboard that Juan had. Both protagonists are defined by labels imposed by others. Chiron is called Little and subjected to homophobic slurs before he fully understands his own identity. As an adult, he reclaims agency by adopting the name Black, originally given to him by Kevin, following what Juan said earlier in the movie, deciding for himself who he wants to be. Similarly, Joe is repeatedly labeled Cowboy or Tex, while Rico is reduced to Ratso. These names strip the characters of their individuality, reinforcing how society imposes identity rather than allowing for self-definition. Editing techniques in both films visually represent trauma as well as desire. Schlesinger employs fragmented, disjointed flashbacks that depict Joe's past, resembling symptoms of post-traumatic stress. These sequences suggest childhood sexual abuse without explicitly stating it, reinforcing themes of repression. Similarly, Ratso's dream montage of Florida contrasts fantasy with harsh reality, highlighting economic desperation. In Moonlight, Jenkins uses editing to portray disassociation. During moments of trauma, such as Chiron's mother yelling, the audio drops out entirely, reflecting emotional withdrawal. In contrast, Chiron's reunion with Kevin, the audio becomes slightly out of sync, creating a surreal atmosphere that emphasizes longing and emotional vulnerability.
Chiron?
Historically, the editing in these two films is important, as it was the first time a male and female African American were nominated at the Academy Awards for editing. Hugh A. Robertson and Joy McMillan. Cinematography in both films challenges traditional depictions of homosexuality and intimacy. In Moonlight, Jenkins places the camera directly between characters, creating a sense of closeness. During the reunion between Kevin and Black, both characters look directly into the camera, breaking the fourth wall. This technique forces the audience into the emotional space of the characters, making the moment deeply intimate. Jenkins describes this approach. Rather than allowing the audience to remain outside of the film, we place the camera between the actors. We want to make the audience and the actor participate. Similarly, in Midnight Cowboy, intimacy is conveyed through subtle cinematography. In the scene where Joe and Ratso talk after Joe wakes up in Ratso's apartment, distressed, worried that Ratso took advantage of him, the two talk and start to trust each other. Jenkins utilizes low-key lighting that shrouds the characters and close-up shots, creating a sense of intimacy. Although both characters maintain a facade of masculinity, the cinematography reveals an underlying emotional dependence. Through mise-en-scene, editing, and cinematography, both Midnight Cowboy and Moonlight explore themes of homosexuality, masculinity, and identity within restrictive social and economic contexts. While separated by nearly 5 decades, both films reveal how societal expectations suppress authentic identity, forcing individuals into isolation. However, where Midnight Cowboy presents a world of repression and ambiguity, Moonlight offers a more direct and humanizing portrayal of queer identity, reflecting evolving cultural attitudes.